Hello, and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is John Rose, and in this video I'd like to take a closer look at 4 ways in which we can work downstream. Now, I've already done a video on this before where I listed 8 ways we use the wrong approach, 3 ways we screw up the law of cause and effect, and 4 ways we work downstream. 2 of which are wrong and 2 are right. And I'm going back over this today. I'm revisiting it today because of some of the comments I've been getting on my YouTube channel recently by some very high green people who only know how to look at negatives. Now, if you've watched any of my videos before, you understand that my whole channel is about understanding going upstream and going downstream. Remember, 3 stages of knowledge. Problems are in the 3rd stage, that's downstream. The solution to problems within our control is to go upstream to look at what we're doing in the 2nd stage and what we're thinking in the 1st stage. The ultimate solution is to go upstream and get reconnected, because that solves most of the downstream problems we have. But as I mentioned, we're damaged. Society's damaged. The environment's damaged. We ourselves are damaged. We have to work downstream because that's just what happens. And again, there's 4 ways to do that. 2 are wrong, 2 are right. We can work downstream the wrong way, and the worst way we do it is when we treat a symptom for a problem within our control, and that's what most of us are doing. So that's the main message of my YouTube channel, is when we look at those problems in the 3rd stage of knowledge, most of them are within our control based on what we do and what we think. And the worst way we work downstream is when we go to allopathic doctors and they give us drugs and poisons to interfere with the communication process so those symptoms don't manifest, giving the illusion that they solve the problem. It's the worst of all ways we work downstream. The next bad way to work downstream is when we don't go upstream also. You have to understand that you always got to go upstream first. Because when we go upstream, most of our problems go away. A lot of those downstream problems are because of us not being connected to one another like we should, which is what going upstream is all about. Now, there is a time and a place to work downstream. As long as we know we got to go upstream, yes, let's go downstream and do all that damage we have. And my gosh, there's so much downstream work we have to do. And then there are things that are outside our control, which means we have to work downstream. You get hit by lightning, there's nothing to do but work downstream, whatever problems you got from that happening to you. And the reason why this applies or pertains to the comments on my YouTube channel now is that we have green personalities coming out criticizing things. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this green personality. And there are no good or bad personalities, but they all have certain traits. And the way this personality test was used, and I talk about it all the time, I've done close to a dozen videos on it. I'll put a link down below to my playlist for my personalysis videos. But the way this test works is you want to use it for 2 main reasons, or 3 actually. One is to use the top graph to make sure you put the person in the right job that they like to do. The second graph is to know how to manage them. Third graph is to know how to motivate them. So the first mistake most businesses make is they don't put people in their like-to graphs in the right job. Take, for example, well, maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself. The next way that they can make a mistake is when they promote within. So let's say you've got someone doing a red-green job. They've been out in the field. They're really good at doing what they're doing, and you want to promote them. So then you bring them in, you give them a blue job, and they don't have the personality for that. So that's a major mistake they have. Another big mistake companies make when they put people, again, the green people are real good at doing what they're doing, so they get promoted to a lot of positions they're not qualified from a willingness point of view to do. Remember, performance equals willingness times ableness. They've got the ability many times, but they don't have the desire to love what they're doing and therefore do as good a job as they could. And one of the worst mistakes companies make is when they take someone, whether they're promoting them or hiring them into a management position, which should either be blue, yellow, or red, yellow. Actually, blue, yellows are the best managers because most people want to be managed that way. So that works very well. But if you want to make a bunch of money, you want someone with a lot of red to make sure they get a lot of work done, right? But the problem is that you never want someone with a lot of green to go into a management position. Because if you're going to be critiqued by your manager. Let's say you got to go in and have a report done on you. They sit you down and say, John, what a great job you're doing. You're doing this unbelievable. We've never seen anybody do this well. And this you're doing great, and this you're doing great, and this you're doing great. And about the only thing we can think of is, you might be able to work a little bit on this. Now that's how you're supposed to be managed to keep you motivated. Now you go to a high green manager, you know what they're going to do? Because they're the perfectionist. They're going to come down, they're not going to tell you all those things you're doing good. No, they're going to go, you're doing this wrong, and all you got to do is correct it, and you can be perfect like me. That's the worst type of manager you can have. It's not the right personality to do that kind of work. Again, the problem with the greens is they're very critical, and they only look at the negatives. They don't understand how to evaluate information. Now, I've already done a video on how to evaluate historical evidence, and the same concept should be applied to understanding current events. How do you go about understanding current events? Because it's confusing, isn't it? There are actually two versions, but the biggest problem most of us have, we never hear the other version. So we're bombarded with one version, and we're manipulated into having an opinion on something we really don't know about. And then if you look at the other version, many times you immediately strike it out because of what you've already heard on the other side. So as I mentioned in how to evaluate historical evidence, when it comes to making sense out of current events or historical events, you got to look at both sides equally. You got to have a huge list on both sides, and then you got to do something that Aristotle would want you to do, because it's the mark of an intelligent mind, and that is to be able to entertain an idea without accepting it. So what do you entertain? You entertain that both versions are right and both are wrong. And when you do that, then things start to make a little more sense. And when it comes to evaluating someone's performance, and you're saying, well, look, he's not doing this downstream, 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 and of course he's not even going upstream. But wait a minute, there's a lot of things we need to do downstream. Look at all the things being done downstream. Oh, but he's not doing this, he's not doing this, he's not doing this. Green, 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 anal retentive. I get on you greens a lot. I don't have any green in my top two graphs, but I got it in my bottom. But that's too narrow focused. You got to look at the big picture. And then you have to consider your sources. And then you have to consider how many layers there are to the onion. It's difficult to really know what's the truth behind things. But it's not hard to understand certain basics when it comes to what's happening on this planet. Watch Satan's Secret Weapon if you haven't seen it yet. I explain how governments go through cycles. Democracy goes through cycles. We're at the last stage in democracy. We're in the dependency stage. The purpose of this stage in this cycle that the powers that be are using against us is to make sure we go right back into bondage. And how is it done? It's by taking away our middle class. It's to make people poor. It's a form of feudalism. So it's not so much how much some people are making, it's how much most of us are not making. That's why usury is the most important thing to do downstream. Now you can't criticize somebody who hasn't addressed that point yet, or who may never address it, as long as they're doing some downstream work. Now we can criticize them and say, God dang it, if you just understood how to go upstream, that would be the ultimate solution. And they may never want to go upstream. But at least some downstream constructive work is being done. Again, 4 ways to work downstream. 2 are necessary, and 2 are wrong. You don't want to treat a symptom for a problem within our control, and you don't want to work downstream unless you really see the big picture and understand how important it is to go upstream, because most of our downstream problems all have to do with the fall of mankind, the very first mistake we made. It's what created 10 subsequent needs from this mistake, 6 of which are used to control us. One of those is the government, Satan's secret weapon. We got in trouble when we made the first mistake, and the mob started to rule, and the mob was bad because we were disconnected. That's what started the whole process. So a lot of people understand that the government's a big piece of the puzzle. Like Sal Alinsky's 3-legged stool analogy, you got big money and the government and the people. And if the people don't get organized, the other 2 will, and they'll control us, and that's what's been happening. And there's only one ultimate solution for that. It's for us to get organized. And I know there's only one way to get organized, and that's to bump up our biophotons flush out the serpent, and when we can all do that, we'll get rid of our subsequent needs that are controlling us, and then for sure, we'll be in for a treat.